Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My wife threatened to divorce me because I didn't want to adopt her 20-year-old daughter after spending $500,000 on her. But karma came in the most unexpected way. I am 42 years old and have been married for a decade to my spouse who is 40. When we met, she was already raising a 9-year-old girl on her own, now 20. The real father hardly figured in her life from birth. He never helped out financially, he hardly ever called, and he only showed up at special moments when it was convenient for him. His visits consisted of bringing a gift bought at the last minute in any cheap shop, staying for an hour at most, and leaving. When I got married, I knew perfectly well that his daughter was included, and I accepted it happily. What's more, I was excited by the idea. I grew up in a stable environment, and I wanted to give her that same security. From the beginning, I gave myself totally to my parental role. I never missed a school meeting, I cheered her on from the sidelines during her sports games, and I collaborated in her academic projects. I was the one who gave her advice about boys and helped her with her math exercises. Financially, I paid for everything. Clothes, dental treatments, extracurricular activities, birthday celebrations, summer camps, and even things her mother considered unnecessary, such as private tutoring when her grades dropped in 10th grade. However, regardless of my efforts, I always felt that I was being kept on the sidelines. Her mom insisted that the biological father remain present, if only for occasional calls or incomplete congratulatory messages. I respected her decision not to overstep boundaries, but gradually I noticed that the father's minimal presence seemed to outweigh all my sacrifices. Every time he phoned or showed up, it seemed to eclipse everything else. Meanwhile, if I simply enforced a curfew, she would respond with, "You're not really my dad." 2 years ago, upon graduating from high school, I really wanted to celebrate her accomplishment. Graduation represents a pivotal moment, and I felt it deserved a proper send-off. To commemorate it, I organized a week-long trip to California for her and her 2 best friends. I covered absolutely everything: flights, accommodation, food, and even extra money for activities like Disneyland and Hollywood tours. It wasn't cheap, but I wanted to give her a memorable experience before starting the next stage of her life. I confess that I was partly hoping the trip would show how much I cared. I wanted to make her feel valued and loved, even if I wasn't her biological father. The strategy seemed to work temporarily. She came back from the trip excited and full of stories. However, weeks after returning, she told us she wanted to take a year off. She explained that she was undecided about what to study or what career to pursue, feeling that she needed time to find herself. To be honest, I didn't like the idea. University was already a considerable expense, and delaying it meant altering our financial planning. Even so, I tried to understand her. I told her she could stay at home while she sorted things out. Then she sprung another surprise. She wanted to spend the year traveling, not just a short vacation. She was talking about backpacking around Europe for 6 months with 2 friends. I felt conflicting emotions. On the one hand, I valued the travel experience as a way of getting to know the world, gaining independence and creating priceless memories. On the other hand, this plan was far from cheap. She didn't work or save to finance it personally. So guess who would bear all the expenses? That's right, me. After discussing it with my wife, I reluctantly agreed to support her. I paid for her plane tickets, accommodation in hostels, and even allocated her a monthly allowance for food, transport, and tourism. It was a huge outlay, but I convinced myself it was worth it if it helped her mature and clarify her future. When he returned, he was brimming with stories about people he had met, places he had visited, and experiences he had had. He showed us hundreds of photographs and talked endlessly about how the trip had transformed his outlook. But one thing remained the same. He still didn't know what to do with his life. After several weeks of doing nothing at home, I gently encouraged him to start university. I reminded her of the importance of getting a degree to keep her options open and build future stability. To her credit, she agreed, and last fall she finally enrolled. Once again, I took on the responsibility of covering her tuition, room, and board. Predictably, her biological father did not show up during this process. He didn't contribute a single cent, nor did he even call to wish her luck as she started classes. Around that time, we started discussing long-term financial plans, specifically for our youngest daughter, now 8 years old. I have always believed in establishing financial security, so I proposed setting up a trust fund. The idea was to guarantee protection for her future, whether for university, entrepreneurship, or simply to have financial support in adulthood. Initially, my wife agreed, considering it a smart decision to plan ahead and set aside money specifically for our youngest daughter. But when my stepdaughter discovered the existence of the fund, everything changed. One night, she confronted me, visibly upset, practically accusing me of favoritism. She questioned why I was setting up a fund for the youngest, but not for her. I tried to calmly explain that it wasn't about preferences. I pointed out that I had already invested significant amounts in her: education, gap year, car, medical expenses, and numerous outlays over the years. The fund was intended to level the playing field for her younger sister, who had not yet received the financial support that she had enjoyed. I thought my explanation would be reasonable and logical, but she was not satisfied. Her broken voice expressed feeling less important, as if I were not really part of the family. I tried to assure her otherwise, but the conversation took an unexpected turn when she said something completely surprising. She wanted me to adopt her legally. I was momentarily speechless. After years of treating me like the intruder, constantly reminding me that I wasn't her real father, now she wanted to make the bond official. I didn't know what to say, so I asked why the adoption had suddenly become so important. At first, I was stunned. After years of hearing, "You're not my real dad," this radical change seemed strange. When I asked her about her reasoning sounded more calculated than sincere. She said it would make her feel more secure and officially integrate her into the family. I discussed this with my wife, expecting understanding, but surprisingly, she supported her daughter. She argued that I had acted as her father for more than 10 years, and formalizing the situation was the next logical step. She accused me of showing favoritism by creating a trust for the younger child without including the older one. This triggered an explosive argument. I expressed my discomfort with the adoption, especially because her daughter spent years keeping me at a distance. I listed all the ways I supported her emotionally and financially, paying for trips, university, a car, and much more. My wife dismissed all of that, claiming it was my obligation as a stepfather. The home environment became unbearable. My stepdaughter began to ignore me, speaking to me only when it was strictly necessary. My wife continued to pressure me to reconsider the adoption, presenting it as proof of family commitment. To me, it felt like they were trying to manipulate me emotionally. The limit was reached when my stepdaughter claimed that she never asked me to do all that for her. I chose to do it voluntarily, so I shouldn't act as if she owed me anything. That statement hit hard. She was right. I decided to get involved because I loved her and wanted to give her better opportunities. But to hear her dismiss my efforts as insignificant was devastating. Now I'm trapped. My wife and stepdaughter think I'm selfish and biased. From my perspective, I am simply trying to protect my biological daughter's future. I have already contributed enormously to my stepdaughter, and I consider it unfair to continue giving when she has never fully accepted me as a father figure, except when it benefits her. So, Reddit, am I the bad guy for refusing to adopt my stepdaughter and exclude her from my biological daughter's trust fund? Update 1. First, I want to sincerely thank you for the enormous support I have received. I really didn't expect my post to resonate with so many people, even those who partially disagree with my vision. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Reading the comments has been emotionally intense, but it has also given me a lot to reflect on. Several issues appeared repeatedly in the comments that I would like to address before commenting on what has happened since my last update. Many asked why I never considered adopting my stepdaughter during my 10 years of marriage. The truth is that I did think about it, especially when she was younger, and at the time I really contemplated taking that step to strengthen our connection and demonstrate my full paternal commitment to her. However, when I raised the idea, my wife strongly opposed it. She felt that adopting her would eliminate her biological father from the picture, worrying that her daughter would feel obliged to choose between us. At the time, I respected her position. I assumed that she understood best what was best for her daughter and that keeping the door open to her biological father would be healthier. In retrospect, I see how that decision created a certain distance between us. I always treated my stepdaughter as my own, but without that legal bond, there was always an invisible line. Her father barely assumed any responsibilities, but his conceptual presence remained latent, and now, years later, it seems that the absence of that legal bond makes me responsible, as if I had failed in some way. It is frustrating because I tried to play a role that was not even left vacant by choice. Another frequent question specifically concerned the trust fund, questioning why it was not established for both girls to avoid all this conflict. First, let me clarify that I am not a millionaire. Creating a trust fund represents a considerable financial commitment. Second, these funds are for long-term planning. My stepdaughter is already 20 years old and is studying at university. For years, I have invested considerably in her education, maintenance, and even extras such as her post-graduation trip and sabbatical year. My 8-year-old daughter, by contrast, is still starting out on her journey. The fund aims to provide her with the same initial boost that her sister has already received. It is not about preferences, but about long-term fairness. I saw comments accusing me of favoritism or creating division between the girls, which hurt me deeply. I don't see it that way at all. In fact, I try to give my stepdaughter opportunities that I didn't have myself growing up. I funded her year abroad in Europe, supported her university education, and backed her like her own biological father never did. This doesn't mean I can ignore the future of my youngest daughter, who deserves the same level of support and care. The trust fund guarantees just that. There were also those who questioned why I continue with my wife if these problems persist. Honestly, marriage is never easy, and there are certainly times when I question whether we share the same goals, but I love my wife and value the life we have built together. We have faced difficulties, but I believe in overcoming them rather than giving up at the first hurdle. Now for the update. The tension at home reached critical levels after my last article. My wife remained angry, my stepdaughter continued to ignore me, and I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home. Fortunately, my biological daughter is too young to understand the situation, although she clearly sensed the general atmosphere. A few days ago, my stepdaughter invited me to what she called a heart-to-heart talk. I was hopeful, thinking that she wanted to resolve any misunderstandings. On the contrary, she maintained her position. She said she had thought deeply about it, and, although she still believed she owed me nothing, she thought that adoption was the right step because it would publicly show her biological father that I was truly present. She even suggested future financial benefits, hinting at open doors for inheritances and the like. I remained calm, explaining my lack of preparation for such a commitment. I made it clear to her that adoption transcends legal formalities, involving a genuine relationship. I questioned her sudden interest after years of estrangement. Her response, because now I'm an adult and I see things differently. It might sound reasonable if each example provided were not linked to financial security. I'm not suggesting complete emotional disinterest, but I can hardly ignore feeling used. That night, we argued again with my wife. She accused me of punishing her daughter for parental mistakes and putting a price on my love. That hurt deeply, because I never understood it that way. I replied that I had already gone above and beyond for her daughter, and to demand that I commit to adoption while feeling uncomfortable was unfair. She left angrily, needing time to think. Now I sleep on the sofa, wondering if my marriage is in serious danger. Update 2. Greetings to all. Thanks again for your comments, advice, and perspectives. Since the last update, circumstances have changed drastically, and I am still honestly processing what has happened. I decided to move away temporarily to clarify my thoughts and avoid further confrontation. I am currently staying with my brother, which is not an ideal situation. I regretted leaving my 8-year-old daughter behind with my wife under these circumstances, but I felt my options were limited. I hope that this distance will help me determine my next steps. The situation at home escalated significantly. My wife is now threatening divorce, interpreting my refusal to adopt and include her daughter in the fund as marital betrayal. She presents it as family abandonment and prioritizing finances over relationships. To make matters worse, I received guilt-tripping messages from her daughter accusing me of destroying her future. She claims to feel abandoned, just as her biological father did. These messages hurt because I really care deeply about her, but their tone and timing reinforce my recent feelings. I am not perceived as someone who tried my best, but as an instrumental resource. Since my departure, I have had important conversations with my brother, also a lawyer. He needed to understand the legal implications of adoption, inheritance, and other issues that have recently arisen. He confirmed much of what was pointed out in comments. Adopting my stepdaughter would legally bind me in uncomfortable ways. For example, after adoption, I would have identical rights to challenge any estate planning, including the fund for my biological daughter. Although I don't believe I would intentionally harm her sister's future, her recent hyper-focus on financial security raises concerns. It is no longer merely a question of emotions, but of legal and economic realities. My brother indicated that early adoption would have allowed these problems to be addressed preventively, but adopting her now, at the age of 20, and considering her background, represents a considerable risk. For greater clarity, I consulted a financial advisor and reviewed my expenses over the last decade. The results surprised even me. Over 13 years, I invested approximately $500,000 in my stepdaughter, including education, health, extracurricular activities, clothing, and everyday expenses. Seeing the final figure, I needed to sit down and take a deep breath. It exceeds what many parents invest in their biological children over a lifetime. What is most shocking is that legally I have no obligations to her, having never formally adopted her while her biological father technically remains present even though he is practically absent. I am not obliged to support her financially beyond current household expenses. My lawyer confirmed that setting up an exclusive fund for my biological daughter is completely within my rights. My wife's argument about injustice has no legal or moral basis. From my perspective, the most difficult thing is that my wife seems to be ignoring our financial reality. She acts as if she can magically generate more money, but every dollar invested in her daughter represents a dollar not saved for our future or the future of our biological daughter. I don't regret supporting my stepdaughter. She deserves stability and opportunities, but eventually, I must set limits. During this period, I also reflected on our marriage and the patterns that led to this situation. My wife always prioritized her daughter's needs, which was understandable and supported when we got married. But gradually, it became less of a partnership and more of a provider as she made the decisions. She insisted on keeping the biological father involved, even though he didn't contribute, and discouraged me from taking on a formal parental role. Now, conveniently, she wants me to adopt her daughter and take on full financial responsibility. One of the most painful moments came when my wife called last night. She mentioned conversations with her friends who agreed that I was being irrational and that any real man would take on family responsibilities. Hearing that was like a slap in the face. What have I been doing for 10 years if not taking responsibility? As for my stepdaughter, she hasn't contacted me since her guilt-inducing messages. Mutual friends say she vents publicly online, portraying me as a cold and selfish stepfather who abandoned her at a crucial moment. Part of me wants to confront her and clear the air, but I realize that would only intensify tensions. I am currently trying to determine how to proceed. I do not wish to divorce, but if my wife persists with ultimatums, I see no easy way forward. I will not risk the future of my biological daughter or my financial stability for someone who only recognizes me paternally when it is convenient. I have also started to draw up a formal plan with clear boundaries and expectations. If my wife and stepdaughter reject this, I will have to make difficult decisions. For now, I am focusing on prioritizing my 8-year-old daughter and protecting her future as much as possible. Thank you again for your support and direct sincerity. You have been instrumental during these chaotic times. I will continue to update as the situation evolves. Update 3. Hi everyone, this is probably my last update. Numerous changes have occurred since my previous post, and I am relieved to say that things are finally stabilizing. It has been an emotionally turbulent few weeks, but I feel we are making good progress, albeit with some complications still to be resolved. The situation changed unexpectedly when my stepdaughter arrived crying one night. She had contacted her biological father for support. She explained the family conflict, her financial worries, and the possibility of adoption. His response, "I'm not interested in playing happy families with you." He also directly reminded her that he was not made of money when she mentioned university expenses. I will confess to a certain indignation on learning this. For years, I shouldered his abandoned responsibilities, thinking that maintaining some paternal link would be preferable to nothing. But his complete irresponsibility and insensitivity were outrageous. I had hoped that she would finally recognize my contributions by supporting her dreams, travels, education. Paradoxically, it had the opposite effect. She came over furious and crying, accusing me of abandoning her just like her father. That hit hard after all my efforts. I kept my composure and refused to argue. She left angrily, needing space, and spent a few days with a friend. During her absence, I had the most honest conversation ever with my wife. I clearly expressed that I could not continue living like this, treated as a financial resource and not a person. I affirmed that I loved them both, but the constant emotional manipulation and lack of recognition were exhausting. I expressed my willingness to continue supporting university studies financially because I value their future, but I completely ruled out adoption. Surprisingly, my wife did not argue. She admitted to being excessively harsh with me. She acknowledged having been torn between supporting her daughter and treating me fairly, losing perspective on my contributions. She apologized for making me feel undervalued. It was not perfect, and there is still some tension in her voice, but it represented a reconciliatory beginning. Days later, my stepdaughter called unexpectedly, not out of anger, but seeking genuine dialogue. I was pleasantly surprised. She said she had reflected while staying with friends and talking with classmates. She acknowledged my many efforts, far exceeding what most parents, biological or not, would ever do. Hearing that greatly eased my emotional burden. We talked for almost an hour as I explained that her outbursts were not really about the trust fund or money, but about fear. She feared the uncertainty of the future and was shocked to confirm that her biological father would never support her. She apologized for recent behavior and expressed understanding for my firmness about the fund for my daughter. She said something memorable. "You have done more for me than I ever acknowledged, and I'm sorry I didn't see it before." That conversation marked a turning point, as she told me her plan to initially attend a community college for 2 years while saving money before transferring to a full-fledged institution. She is applying for scholarships and looking for work-study programs. I was proud to see her take control of her future. A financial advisor friend even helped by creating a realistic budget and financial plan, and she was genuinely grateful. Domestically, we continued to progress. We started marriage counseling to improve communication and rebuild trust. It has not been easy, but I perceive substantial improvement. This experience taught me a lot about setting limits, the importance of fairness, and valuing people beyond material contributions. For those who are wondering, no, I will not adopt my stepdaughter. We all agreed it was unnecessary to continue supporting her emotionally or helping her with university. Our relationship improved by building on mutual understanding, not guilt or obligation. Thank you, Reddit, for helping me navigate this complication. Your direct honesty, legal perspectives, and shared experiences were vital. It has been a difficult journey, but I feel stronger and more mentally clear than I have been in years. My family is far from perfect, but we are moving forward positively, and for now, that is enough. For anyone facing a similar situation, remember to set boundaries, communicate openly, and stand up for your personal worth. You deserve to be appreciated for who you are, not merely for your contributions. Update 4. Reddit. Greetings again. I don't have much news as things are gradually but consistently improving. However, I wanted to address some comments, especially those calling me weak or suggesting making my wife and stepdaughter pay for their behavior. I understand these reactions. It is easy to recommend walk away or stand firm by observing from the outside, but for me, life presents many nuances. Certainly, this represented significant conflict, pushing me to the limit, but to end my marriage because of one problem, however huge, would mean wasting 10 years of love, companionship, and building a life together. If there is the slightest possibility of resolving situations, I will take it. With regard to my stepdaughter, she did make hurtful comments that complicated situations, but I continued to care deeply about her. Fundamentally, she is an intelligent and resilient young woman with a bright future. She is learning and maturing, like all of us. Occasionally, continuing to try to improve situations requires more effort than giving up. That is what I am trying to do, to rebuild an imperfect but valuable family. That completes my update. Thank you for listening.